Hey guys, good to be with you again. I hope you've had a really good week this week. Hope it's been good to be back at school. Hope you've had some good times with your teachers, with your friends, back actually in your classrooms. I hope there's been some good joys and blessings that have come from that this week. I just want to kick off today by telling you two stories. One that you're probably very familiar with, but this first one you might not know as well. It's about a guy called Apollos, who we meet in Acts and then hear about again later in one of the letters that Paul writes in the New Testament. But we meet this guy called Apollos in Acts, which is the book that the rest of our church has been working through at the moment and will continue to do so for the next little while. We find him in Acts chapter 18, and I want to read a little bit for you. I'm going to start reading at verse 24. So this is Acts 18, verse 24. A Jew named Apollos, a native of Alexandria, came to Ephesus. He was a learned man, with a thorough knowledge of the Scriptures. He had been instructed in the way of the Lord, and he spoke with great fervour, and taught about Jesus accurately, though he only knew of the baptism of John. He began to speak boldly in the synagogue. When Priscilla and Aquila heard him, they invited him to their home, and explained to him the way of God more adequately. When Apollos wanted to go to Achaia, the brothers and sisters encouraged him, and wrote to the disciples there to welcome him. When he arrived, he was a great help to those who by grace had believed, for he vigorously refuted his Jewish opponents in public debate, proving from the Scriptures that Jesus was the Messiah. Now, this guy called Apollos seems to be a really good speaker. He's a really good teacher. He's really excited and enthusiastic. He speaks really well. And he's gone all over the place, and we meet him here in Ephesus. He's preaching about Jesus. He's a really well-educated dude. He seems to have a lot going for him. He's one of these future leaders of the church. But we meet him here in these early days, where he's got a lot of skill. He seems to be a really good communicator. But Luke, the author of the book of Acts, tells us that Apollos has been preaching about Jesus, but he only knew about the baptism of John. Now, as you might remember, as we've been reading through the Gospel of John, we've been hearing a lot about the things that Jesus got up to. His baptism from John was really early. There's so much more that Jesus has done while he was alive, and notably, he has died and been raised from the dead since then. So, Apollos has a very little story of Jesus. He knows very little about him. And yet, here he is preaching the gospel, preaching the good news about Jesus to these people in Ephesus. And then we also, in this story, meet this couple who are just Christians doing their everyday life kinds of things in the city of Ephesus, and they hear Apollos speak. They see the skill and the talent that he has, and they realize that he doesn't know the full gospel. So they take him into their home, and they teach him a fuller story about the things that Jesus has done, notably his death and resurrection. And then after that, this church in Ephesus sees and trusts that Apollos has the gospel now, and they send him off to keep preaching the gospel elsewhere. Now, why am I reading you this story? I think in Apollos, we see this guy who could have been really arrogant. He could have been really proud in the skill, the education that he had. But that's not the character of the guy we see. We see someone who is gifted, who is skilled, yet is willing to sit humbly under the teaching of a couple who, from what we know, don't have anywhere near as much education as he does. But they do have more of the story. So I think we see in Apollos a really humble attitude. An attitude of teachability. One who's willing to sit and be corrected and take that on. I want to read for you another story. This is the one that I'm sure you're more familiar with. This is a story of when Jesus washed his disciples' feet. I'm going to read about it from John chapter 13. I'm going to start at verse 4. Jesus got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that he had wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus replied, You do not realize, now what I am doing, but later you will understand." "No," Peter said, "you shall never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no part with me." "Then, Lord," Simon Peter replied, "not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well." Jesus answered, "Those who have had a bath need only wash their feet. Their whole body is clean. You are clean, though not every one of you." For he knew who was going to betray him, and that was why he said that not every one of them was clean. When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. "Do you understand what I have done for you?" he asked them. "You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done. Very, very truly, I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them." I think this is one of the most prominent examples that we have of Jesus' humility, that he is willing to be the one who is the servant, the one who places others above himself. We have examples of that all over Scripture. The fact that Jesus came into the world as a human is an example of his humility. But here, we see that so starkly. He does the role of a servant, and he says, "Yes, I am your teacher. Yes, I am your Lord. But this is what it means to be one who has authority, to be one who loves and cares for people. It is to be a servant, to do the things that no one's willing to do the things that are beneath the rank of that person, to be the one who is the self-sacrificial servant leader." Jesus says, "This is the kind of guy that I am. This is the kind of way that I'm showing you what it is to be human. This is what my people are like. So if you want to be one of my people, this is what life looks like." Guys, we've been in this series looking at marks of the new resurrection life. We're looking at what does it mean for us to be people who are united with Jesus in his death and resurrection. That because Jesus has been raised to life, he has on offer for us that opportunity to be people of his new resurrection life. People who get to put on the traits and the characteristics of the world that Jesus has made possible, as he's become victorious over sin and death. That's what we're exploring at the moment. And as I'm sure you can gather, today we're looking at humility. I think we have examples in Jesus, certainly, but also in other people in the Gospels, people like Apollos. I think we see in these stories that humility is about teachability. It's about serving and honoring other people. So we're going to explore what that might look like for us. We're going to think of other things that the scriptures talk to us about humility when we meet together on Thursday. Humility is one of those traits where I think we can get it wrong a lot of the time. I think our world thinks about humility as being a bit of a doormat, being someone that some people can trample over. We're going to explore together on Thursday what humility is in a biblical sense. We're going to think about it in the sense that humility helps us to be people who place ourselves in the right position, where we have a good sense of the glory and majesty of God and what it is for us to be creatures, to be created by him, to get those relationships right. And as we understand who we are before God, we'll understand more of what it is to be people who are relating to other humans. How do we relate to God? How do we relate to one another? How are we to think of ourselves? What does the scriptures tell us about those things? So we're going to explore those and other things together on Thursday night. Really looking forward to seeing you. Fingers crossed tomorrow's announcement will let us know that we can actually meet in person. So humility, guys, let me encourage you to think more of those two examples that I've thought of. And then maybe have a little bit of an explore in the Bible. Where else do you find examples or instructions for God's people to be people who are humble? And we'll explore more of that together. So friends, I hope you have a good start to the week. I hope you enjoy your Sunday today. And hopefully we'll see you very, very soon.